We're speaking with Rebecca Petruck, who is the author of Steering Toward Normal, a middle grade contemporary, out now from Abrams Amulet. So, Rebecca, your main character is Diggy, whose main preoccupation is getting his 4-H steer, Joker, ready to compete at the state fair in the hopes of a shot at the Grand Champ. After we've established this, his life gets infinitely more complicated. Can you tell us a bit about what happens to Diggy?
So Diggy lives in a very small town where everybody knows everybody's business. And one of his backstory is that he was left on his father's porch by his mother when he was a baby, and she took off and left town on a tractor. And so this is kind of part of the town legend because it's kind of a funny story, and they tease him about it. But it's also, not at all funny to Diggy because he was left by his mom.
Right.
But he has a great relationship with his dad, who everybody calls Pop. And, so he's 13 and he's gotten used to it. He's come to terms with it. When one night, one of his classmates, Wayne, is left on his doorstep, much like Diggy was left. And Pop is told that Wayne is actually his son, and he has to live with them now. So, of course, this is a shocker for Diggy, one, because it brings up everything about his own history, about having been left by his mom, and two, because he suddenly has this half-brother who is in the same grade as him, is actually a little older than him, is bigger than him, that is supposedly moving in. So it's a lot to cope with. Very quickly, and obviously the kind of person, Wayne's father, Harold, who could do that, he's not in a state to take back this child or take care of Wayne. So Pop ends up kind of being a mediator, intervening and taking in Wayne temporarily, which makes it very frustrating for Diggy. Mm-hmm. He's not sure how he's supposed to react to this. Pop, of course, is giving Wayne a lot more attention, or a lot of attention, and it just shakes up everything that Diggy believed about his life and kind of his place in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just so much going on in this book. You have Diggy negotiating these new family ties. He has these old wounds about his mother, who, as you mentioned, literally left town on a tractor. And then he also has this goal of having his steer compete at the state fair. And this is actually the sort of overarching story, is the care of these 4-H calves that turn into steers. So you are a ex-4-H kid. You were a 4-H kid, right?
I was in 4-H, but I never raised or competed steers.
Oh, okay.
That was all research and interviewing competitors and going to actual fairs and visiting farms and stuff. So that research really was amazing.
Right. So you actually toured around and went to competitions.
I did, and my very first fair was actually called the Pennsylvania Farm Show. They do their kind of state fair system a little differently. And I followed a student around for the course of the competition, and he ended up winning grand champion, which was super exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was more, it was very lucky that I had been introduced to him in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So to get to experience that was almost like, winning myself.
Yes, of course.
But then I also attended the North Carolina and the Minnesota state fairs and interviewed several 4-H competitors, followed them around, got to know their steers a little bit, and then interviewed also quite a few more through 4-H contacts on the phone. And they were all incredibly generous with their time, not just with me, but with their animals. And one of the things that I found so touching about watching them interact with their steers is that they would all be very serious in telling me that, it's not a good idea to name your steers. You don't want to get too attached because, steers are beef cattle. I mean, they're meant to be sold to the packager for slaughter. And while these students are telling me this, the way they're handling their animals, it's very, very clear that they adore these steers. They love these steers.
Right.
And so there was just that kind of touching witnessing of, what their brains knew and what their hearts did, and the kind of conflict that lived in them, for an entire year. It was touching and heartbreaking at the same time.
Yes, which is something that comes across so clearly in your book. I was going to ask about that because you have these two boys. Of course, Wayne decides to get a steer also, like Diggy has, and Diggy is showing him the ropes. So they're spending all of this time and energy. And obviously, as you say, grow to love these animals, with the end game being off to the dinner plate, right? So, and then you also have Wayne, whose mother has recently died and is just really deep grief. So the book, like for all of its sort of shenanigans and cow poop and practical jokery, it feels to me like it's very much about, death and letting go. Do you think so?
Yes, it's really, I think of it as a book about choosing how to cope with the situations of our lives. Wayne could choose to be just a miserable, unhappy person because his mom died, and nobody would, blame him for that. Diggy could choose to let Wayne kind of, sit and be smothered by his grief. But I think, the thing for me with Diggy is because he's raised and competed with steers prior to this, he's kind of learned that you take the moments you can. And that if you're lucky, your steers have only one bad day. You give them as much love as you can, you take care of them, you have fun with them, and then at the end, you let them go. And it's something that teaches him how to keep his heart open, even though he knows there's going to be pain. And that's a really, really difficult thing for anybody to do, I think. Even us as adults, we want to protect ourselves from being hurt, physically, of course, but even more so emotionally. So Diggy has this incredible gift, and I saw this in so many of the 4-H'ers I met with, too, in being able to, keep their hearts open and love their animals and share themselves and their time, knowing that there was an end date and it was going to be painful and it was really, really going to hurt. I mean, that last day is called the Day of Tears.
Oh, interesting.
And pretty much across the board, for all the different state fairs. And so there are two elements. There's the coping and the letting go, but also there's the choosing, how we're going to react to situations.
Tell me this, do steers, obviously, I mean, you wouldn't make this up, but I can't believe that steers actually get blown dry with a hairdryer.
Yes.
They do.
Well, so steers on a feedlot are really meat in the hoof.
Right.
But a show steer is far more frou-frou than a pet dog or cat. I mean, they get hours of attention a day. They're washed and blow-dried, or they're at least rinsed and blow-dried. They have more hair products than I do. And one of the funniest things for me, walking around the fair is seeing these boys and men with, their jeans slung with all sorts of different hair products, like old-fashioned gunslingers, and every pocket has some kind of spray or shine, dangling from it. It makes the hair stand up, and the spray that makes it shine, and then the blackening a little bit of blackening for the hooves. There are different rules for different fairs. I really enjoyed that part.
What part of Steering Toward Normal will you read for us?
I will read from almost the very beginning. The only thing that you would need to know is that Diggy's dad is known as Pop, and though he's promised himself not to name his steer, he has already named his steer Joker. After dinner, Diggy went out to check on the calf again. The sun had taken its summer-like heat with it. A firm northeastern wind rattled fall crisp leaves on branches that cracked and creaked. Diggy led Joker into the shivering night. A steer needed to get accustomed to all sorts of sounds so he wouldn't be easily spooked by the time he entered the show ring. The chill air was a double bonus because cold stimulated hair growth. Several kids he'd compete against at the fair kept their calves in cold rooms all the time, but Pop had absolutely refused 3 years running to air condition a cow all summer long so his hair would grow thicker. The improved weather was a sign. This would be a good year, his year to win Grand Champ. The calf was not wild about leaving the cozy barn and bleated a protest, crowding into Diggie's side. Diggie hummed and patted and had Joker calm again until a truck barreled down the gravel road and skidded to a stop at the end of their long driveway. Diggie looped Joker's lead onto the fence rail, just in case the calf thought about bolting, and talked quietly while scratching the steer's rump to soothe him. The dust settled to reveal a man stumbling around the truck bed. He heaved a suitcase onto the ground, and it popped open like one of those 3D party decorations. He lunged for the passenger door, jerking it so hard it squealed, then reached into the cab with 2 hands and hauled the boy out, tossing him onto the jumbled mound of spilled clothing. The door hung open. Momentum slammed it shut when the man gunned the truck and sped away. Gravel and dust spewed over the unmoving heap of clothes and boy. Wind scrabbled through the grass. Clouds flashed at the moonlight. Joker sidled into Diggie again, but this time was soothed by a shaking hand. Diggie really did not want to know what had been left on his doorstep. Diggie knew about doorsteps. When he was a month old, his mom had bundled him into a laundry basket and left him on top. He felt a deep gut rustle like the coming of a full-body shudder. This kid wasn't a baby, and he hadn't been bundled up and safely deposited anywhere. He had been tossed out of a pickup truck, like trash, and now huddled into his sprung suitcase as if he could burrow through it to somewhere else. Diggie couldn't leave anyone like that, no matter how much he wanted to. He made sure Joker's lead was tight on the fence rail, then jogged close enough to the house to call out for Pop. As he headed up the drive toward the abandoned kid, the boy moved. He knelt, swiped an arm over his face, then pushed things back into the suitcase, trying too soon to zip it all back up. Wayne? Wayne Graff and Diggie had math and science together. That was it. There were nearly 100 kids in their grade. It wasn't like they all hung out at each other's houses. When Wayne looked up, the yard light tinted his face green. Diggie knew Wayne's hair was blonde, that he was always pale pink, even in summer, and his eyes were a weird light blue. But the yard light washed those hints of color away. He stood trembling, even though he was dressed for fall. "Who was that?" Diggie asked. Wayne stared at him like English was a foreign language. Pop strode up to them. "You all right, son?" he asked Wayne. "Don't call me that," Wayne bit out. He grabbed the suitcase, and though he was a big kid, a lot bigger than Diggie anyway, he stumbled under its weight. The suitcase fell and flipped open again. Wayne stood hunched over it. Pop approached him the way he would a spooked animal, slowly and with quiet words. "It's late, and you must be tired." He pulled the suitcase closed, and Wayne neither resisted nor moved. "Why don't you come in and tell us what brought you here?" Wayne looked up at Pop, his face intent. "Did you know my mom?" Diggie stilled. The words were one thing, but it sounded like the question was something else. Diggie suddenly felt like he couldn't get enough air. "You know I did. Diggie and I saw you at her funeral," Pop said. Diggie wanted to run. Wayne's mom had been Diggie's 3rd grade teacher. He and Pop had gone to her funeral only 3 weeks ago, the day after school started. But now Wayne was asking if Pop knew her. "We looked for a marrow donor, but it was too late." Wayne added, "Her blood was type O." "Come inside." Pop put a hand on Wayne's shoulder. Wayne jerked away. "My dad's type A and I'm B," he shouted like an accusation. Diggie barely heard Wayne add, "He says you're my dad, and I have to live here now."